They say some moments never fade, like a tiny scratch on the heart that only becomes clearer the more you try to forget. For me, that moment was my brother's engagement party, the night I realized I'd never truly belonged to this family, never been welcomed, never been one of them. It was an unusually cold April evening. The hotel ballroom sparkled with lights and laughter glasses clinking in a rhythm I couldn't connect with. Everyone looked stunning in pastel gowns and sharp tuxedos. As for me, I wore a long sleeved, deep purple dress, plain and forgettable. I didn't want attention, I just wanted to stay in the shadows, like always, beside me. My daughter Grace clutched my hand, her wide eyes dazzled by the twinkling lights and the pristine white floral wedding cake. Mom, is this like the parties in princess movies? She whispered, full of wonder. I tried to smile, but my heart sank, David. My brother stepped onto the stage with his fiancée, Sophia. They looked like they had walked straight out of a magazine. David wore a tailored cream suit, and Sophia shimmered in a silver gown, hair pinned up, makeup, flawless eyes cold as ice. When Sophia's gaze swept the room and landed on me, I saw it. Her expression changed like she had spotted something that didn't belong. A second later, she leaned toward my mother and whispered something. My mother didn't ask for clarification. She just nodded, that familiar final kind of nod that had made so many decisions for me growing up. She stepped away from her group of guests and walked toward me. Her heels tapped sharply against the marble, her shadow stretching behind her in the glow. Lily, she said, her voice low but crisp. Please don't go near the stage tonight. I blinked. Why Meredith feels your presence might bring discomfort. You understand, don't you? This is David's special day. A sharp sting spread through my chest. I said nothing. I wanted to believe I had heard her wrong or that she was joking, but her face didn't change. No anger, no emotion, just a cold indifference, like what she said was obvious and not up for discussion. I heard myself ask, You mean I bring bad luck? Lily. She sighed, tilting her head. You know how things have always gone. Your father passed away on your birthday. Your marriage didn't work out. I'm not blaming you, but today isn't the day to take chances. I couldn't breathe. The room still buzzed with music and laughter, but to me it all fell silent. That old familiar feeling returned, that I was the odd piece that never fit, never meant to be part of happy moments. I nodded. No protest, no questions, just nodded, because I was used to being excluded, because I no longer had the strength to prove I wasn't a risk. Grace tugged at my hand. Mommy, why aren't we taking pictures with Uncle David? I bent down and brushed her hair gently, because not. Everyone sees special the way we do. Sweetie. Grace frowned, confused, but the look in her eyes, first puzzled, then quietly shifting into something else, told me she was beginning to understand something she shouldn't have to. And I didn't yet know that look from my 7-year-old daughter would spark what no one in that room would be able to forget. I don't remember the exact color of the dress I wore that day, the day I became a ghost in my own family, but I remember the phone call. It rang. Around 7:00 p.m. while I was coloring my science homework with a nearly worn-out pencil, my mom ran to answer it. When she returned, her face was pale. No one said a word. I asked, What's wrong, Mom? And she simply said, Your father won't be coming home. My father died in a car crash, a sudden rainstorm, a head-on collision on a slippery road. He was on his way to buy my birthday cake. I had just turned 8 that night. I didn't just lose him, I lost my mother's warmth. She never said I was to blame, but she never denied it when others implied I might be. I once overheard my aunt whisper to my mom in the kitchen, if he hadn't gone out for that cake, maybe things would have turned out differently. My mom didn't nod, but she didn't object either. She just stirred her coffee. That's when I learned to live quietly. People whispered that I was unlucky, that maybe I brought misfortune. I didn't fully grasp those words at first, but I began to notice how my mother's eyes would change when I entered the room. How her voice was always softer when she said David's name. My brother born 2 years after that fateful day. Like an attempt to fill the void I had unknowingly left behind, David had everything I didn't. Attention, pride, expectations. I wasn't jealous. I loved him. When we were little, he used to grab my hand at family gatherings and whisper, Lily, come play with me. He was the only one who made me feel seen, but that changed. In high school, David shined, smart, athletic, popular. Meanwhile, I lost my scholarship due to depression. I wanted to become an architect, but no one in the family believed I could do something practical. They said girls should be more realistic. Who's going to hire someone to design houses? I fell in love at 21. He was gentle, patient. I thought I had found a safe harbor. But after 2 miscarriages in 3 years, everything fell apart. Left a letter on the table. I tried. But every day with you feels like a wound. I don't know how to heal. I didn't blame him. I was used to being left behind quietly. For years, I drifted. No direction, no anchor, only grace kept me grounded. Doctors said I had less than a 20% chance of a successful pregnancy, but Grace arrived healthy, strong-willed, radiant like a miracle. And my mother, she held the newborn in her arms and said, "Let's hope she doesn't carry her mother's fate." I thought I'd grown numb, but a single sentence like that made me want to vanish. What I never got used to was how my heart still clung to the hope that one day my mother would hug me, not out of duty, but because she truly wanted to. But even tonight at David's dazzling engagement party, I was still on the sidelines. My mom stood on stage hand in hand with Sophia, her perfect future daughter-in-law, beaming for the cameras. No one mentioned me, no one noticed me. I knew if I slipped out quietly, no one would call me back, no one at all. Only Grace still held onto my hand as if her world didn't need anyone else but me. Her eyes showed no fear, no confusion, but something in them made me shiver as if she was about to do something I wouldn't be able to stop. Grace swayed beside me, her hands dancing to the music only she could hear, the lights reflected off her soft brown hair, making her look like a tiny angel, lost in a world of invisible rules and quiet prejudice. I looked down at her, trying to swallow the lump in my throat, left by my mother's words. "Mommy, what does that cake taste like? Is it vanilla, like the one I like?" Grace asked, eyes wide like glass marbles. I nodded, trying to smile. "Maybe, but I think we should stay here, okay?" She tilted her head, puzzled. She didn't understand, and honestly, I couldn't explain to a 7-year-old that her mother wasn't allowed near her own brother on his big day just because some people thought she brought misfortune. Grace squeezed my hand gently, her little warm hand. "Mom, is it because we got here late?" I bent down forehead to forehead with her. "No, Angel, you didn't do anything wrong. If there's one thing in this world that kept me from falling apart, it's Grace. After all the heartbreak, she's the only reason I still believe I'm worthy of love. I used to think I couldn't be a mother, that my body was just an empty shell, incapable of holding life. But then Grace came miraculously, like the world still owed me one last chance. I remember the first time she had a fever at 10 months old. I was so panicked, I held her all night, afraid to even blink. I was the one who sat by her bed after every nightmare, repeating the same fairy tale so many times. I had every punctuation mark memorized just to help her fall asleep. No one helped me in those early years. Not a single phone call from my mother, not a word from any relative. But Grace was never short on love, I once promised myself. No matter how much the world turned its back on me, I would never let my daughter feel as alone as I once did. And yet, here we were at a family party where she saw the disapproving look from her grandmother, the awkward silence from the aunts and uncles, and Sophia's cold smile the moment we walked in. I could only hope Grace didn't notice that she was still innocent enough to believe in beautiful things. "Mom, can I go?" "Look at the candy table. Just look. I promise I won't take any," she whispered. I nodded. "But don't go too far from me, okay?" She giggled and took off her dress, fluttering behind her. With each skip, I watched her small figure disappear into the crowd, my heart swelling with a mix of sweetness and ache. No one here understood me, and they didn't need to. But Grace, she saw me, listened to me, believed in me with no conditions. When she came back, holding a pink candy someone had given her, I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't you promise not to take anything?" "Don't take it," Grace chirped. "The man at the table said I was the cutest girl tonight and told me to pick one." I laughed. "You really know how to melt people's hearts." She sat beside me, propping her chin on her hand like a little grown-up. "Mom, how come no one asked you to be in any pictures? Don't they know you're the best at posing?" I said nothing. That question, so simple, cut deeper than any insult. I awkwardly brushed her hair and murmured, "Sometimes people don't realize what's special until it speaks up." Grace looked up at me, her expression suddenly serious. "Do you think if I speak up, they'll understand how amazing you are?" I shivered. "Grace, all you need to do is be yourself. I'll handle the rest." She nodded, but I could feel something stirring inside her, like she was planning something I couldn't stop. And even though I was nervous, I couldn't dim the light growing inside her, a light I had never dared to ignite for myself. I thought I could quietly stay in the background until the party ended, keeping the peace for Grace's sake. But life never favors those who just want calm. The MC's voice echoed through the hall, inviting both families to the stage for the ring ceremony. Music swelled sweet and elegant like sugar-coating a cake that had already gone stale. People moved, lights shifted to the front. I stayed where I was alone among the emptying chairs, wearing that familiar, faint smile like a mask I knew too well. Grace glanced around, then tugged at my sleeve. Mom, why? Aren't we going up? I bent down and whispered. Because today is Uncle David's day, and sometimes people don't want anyone else messing with the picture they've painted. She frowned. But you didn't mess anything up. I tried to respond, but my throat closed. How could I explain that? Just existing made them uncomfortable. Emily didn't say another word. She just sat there, feet swinging, but her eyes stayed on the stage, watching those perfect smiles under the lights. I didn't notice when she slipped away, not until I saw her light blue dress weaving through the chairs toward the front. I froze. Grace, I called softly, voice cracking. Come back. But she didn't stop. She didn't rush either, just moved with a quiet confidence, like she already had a plan. I pushed through the crowd, whispering apologies, trying not to draw attention, but it was too late. People had started to notice Grace. The whispers began. She stopped near the stage. From where I stood, I saw David smiling awkwardly, while Sophia's eyes turned icy as she spotted my daughter. My mother stood behind them, stiff lips pressed tightly. Then Grace walked right up to the microphone on the podium. My heart nearly stopped. Grace, no, I almost cried out as the music faded. She had to stand on tiptoe to reach the mic. Someone moved to stop her, but hesitated. Maybe because of the strange calm in her 7-year-old eyes. Excuse me, Grace said, her voice clear across the room. I just want to say something. The hall fell silent, like the air had been sucked out. Every eye was on her. I stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. My name is Grace, and my mom. She's the best person in the world. Murmurs broke out. Someone behind me gasped. People say my mom brings bad luck, Grace continued without a single tremble, but I don't think so. She takes care of me when I'm sick. She works hard so I can eat yummy food and read comics every night. She never yells, she just hugs me. I saw my mother squint slightly. Brian looked confused. Grace turned to Sophia. Miss Sophia, you shouldn't say things like that about my mom. Sophia froze. I heard you tell Grandma David's easy. To control marrying him will be less of a headache, but you told everyone you love him. A collective gasp rippled through the room. A phone lifted, then another recording. Sophia's face flushed red. Her lips quivered but said nothing. My mother looked stunned, panic in her eyes for the first time that night. Grace ended with a sentence that floored me. If anyone thinks my mom doesn't belong here, they're wrong. My mom isn't bad luck. She's the luckiest thing in my life. Then she gently placed the mic down and stepped off the stage, small and steady, in a room that had gone utterly silent. And I stood there speechless. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to defend myself. My daughter had done it for me in front of everyone. I don't remember what happened in those first few seconds after Grace left the mic. Maybe it was the sound of a camera shutting off. Maybe it was my heartbeat drowning out everything else. The room was packed, yet it felt eerily still, like the entire crowd forgot how to breathe at once. Grace looked back at me, eyes clear and steady. She returned before I could move, wrapping her hand tightly around mine. Her tiny fingers squeezed my palm as if to remind me I'm not alone. On stage, David hadn't moved. He was staring at Sophia, trying to make sense of who she really was. Sophia stood frozen, scanning the room like she was looking for an escape, but no one came to her rescue. She looked at my mother for help, but Mom just stood there, lips pressed tight, gaze shaken. David pulled his hand away from Sophia's. You really said that. His voice was barely a whisper. Sophia still forced a smile, lips trembling. David, it was just a silly comment. I didn't mean, is it true or not? David interrupted, his voice firmer now. The room held its breath. Sophia froze. Then instead of apologizing, she crossed her arms. Who doesn't say silly things when they're tired? That kid doesn't know anything. She's just a child. Big mistake, David's. Expression changed. His eyes darkened, jaw clenched. He stepped forward, paused, and slid the engagement ring off his finger without a word. David, are you kidding me? Meredith rushed after him, reaching for the ring. You're ending everything over a child's words. No, he said firmly. I'm ending it because I stopped trusting myself a long time ago. I let others speak for my heart, but today a 7-year-old reminded me who's always been there, who truly deserves respect. Then David turned and walked straight toward me and Grace. My mom stepped out to stop him. David. Don't do this out of emotion, but David didn't slow. He walked past her like she was smoke. No more hesitation, no more doubt. When he reached me, he paused, eyes red. Lily, he said, using my name for the first time in years, I'm sorry I saw you, but I didn't have the courage to stand by you. I stared at him throat tight, unable to speak. You did everything alone. Since Dad died, you took care of me, calmed my nightmares. Listen to my high school heartbreaks. You didn't deserve to be cast out like this, and I owe you an apology. He hugged me. No words, just a tight, real hug, the kind that says a brother has finally come home. Grace stood beside us, smiling up at me, then David bent down and hugged Grace too. Thank you, Grace. You're braver than all of us put together. A small applause began from the far side of the room. I turned. Uncle James, my dad's younger brother, was smiling and nodding as if someone had finally said what he never dared to. The atmosphere in the room shifted. The people who once pretended not to hear began whispering. Some lowered their heads in shame, others looked at Sophia with puzzled expressions. My mother took a step back, and for the first time her eyes met mine without the usual blame. Instead, there was confusion, maybe even a sense of being lost. I didn't know what would happen next, whether Sophia would cause a scene or my mother would try to restore order. But in that moment, I knew I was no longer alone, no longer the one left behind. I used to think I had to stay silent, to keep the peace, to avoid making others uncomfortable. But Grace, a 7-year-old child, taught me that some truths, if left unsaid, will keep crushing us day by day. And today that truth had been spoken. The entire room had heard it. No one could ignore it anymore. The next morning, as the first light crept through the curtains, I lay still with my hand resting on my forehead, as if the night before had been a dream, a wave of emotion so overwhelming I hadn't fully processed what had happened. Then the phone rang, soft but certain, pulling me back to reality, a message from David. Hey sis, I don't really know how to start, but I just want you to know I'm grateful. Grateful that you've always been there, even though I didn't really see it until yesterday. Thank you, and thank Grace too. I read the message over and over, afraid the words might vanish if I blinked. A warmth spread through my chest, not because of an apology, but because for the first time I felt seen. Less than an hour later, I got a call from Uncle Richard, my dad's younger brother. His voice was warm, just like I remembered when he used to take me to the park after my father's funeral. Lily, I just want to say I'm proud of you. He said plainly, last night I saw your father in you, calm, brave, and never silent in the face of wrong. You did the right thing, not just for yourself, but for Grace. I think it's time this family learns what real love looks like. I couldn't find the words. He was the only one in the family who never called me a burden or a mistake, but for years, like most of them, he stayed silent. And now he was the first to break that silence. That afternoon, while I was making lunch for Grace, the phone rang again. This time, the name on the screen made me freeze, Mom. I stood still, finger hovering over the answer button. Part of me wanted to ignore it to avoid the confrontation, but then I thought of Grace's eyes last night, the strength in them that I had never been able to find in myself. I picked up. Hello, Lily, my mother said. Her voice was the same, not high, not trembling, but for the first time it lacked its usual certainty. I just wanted to ask if you and Grace got home. Okay, I blinked. Yes, we made it back safely. A few seconds of silence. I could hear the clink of her teacup on the other end, an old habit of hers when she was unsure I was thinking of stopping by, bringing some cookies for Grace. She still likes chocolate chip, right? Her voice softened just a little, not quite an apology, but in a relationship fractured over decades. A call like this was already a long journey. I nodded, then remembered she couldn't see me, so I said quietly, yes, I think Grace would like that. That evening, Grace and I lay on the couch, her head resting on my lap, holding her favorite stuffed bear. She looked up and asked softly, Mom, are you sad? Grandma didn't say sorry. I paused for a moment, then smiled and brushed her hair. I think sometimes people need more time. What matters is they've started to listen. Grace nodded, her eyes beginning to close. I just want them to know you're the best mom in the world. They won't have to wait long. I'll tell them for you. I hugged her tight, feeling her steady little heartbeat against my chest, a quiet reminder I am not alone. The next day, a bouquet of flowers was delivered to our door. No name, just a small handwritten note for those who were once made to feel invisible. Now, it's your time to shine. I knew it wasn't a miracle. People don't change overnight, but I also knew because of Grace, a door had opened. Not one inviting me into a party I was once excluded from, but one leading me out of the limits that had been placed on me my whole life. And for the first time in years, I didn't just step out. I walked forward, believing I deserved it. I was no longer the one labeled bad luck. That night, after Grace had fallen asleep in my arms, I sat alone on the little balcony of our apartment, a warm cup of tea beside me. The flickering lights from the windows around us pulsing like the heartbeat of the city. I thought about everything that had happened over the past few days, things I wouldn't have believed if someone had told me in advance. I used to think silence was the only way to survive in a family that branded me as unlucky. I accepted the sidelines, convinced that quiet sacrifice was all I had to offer. But Grace, my 7-year-old daughter, stood tall in a room full of adults and said aloud what I never dared to, and I realized then I was never unlucky. I was just the first one in our bloodline, brave enough to break the cycle. For years, they called me a problem or a bad energy, but when I looked closer, what I really brought was honesty, a voice that didn't bend to the unspoken compromises everyone else had grown used to. I didn't follow the rules they taught. Stay silent to keep the peace indoors so no one loses face. Bear the weight to avoid hurting anyone's feelings. And because I was different, they decided I was the problem. Turns out the problem was never me. It was the silent system within this family, a place where pain was hidden and anyone who spoke up was seen as a threat. And Grace, a little child, taught me that speaking up isn't disrespectful, it's a form of love, a way of protecting what's right, a declaration that says, Mom deserves better. I used to shrink myself to fit into the mold others set for me. I used to ask how I could fit their image. Gentle, but never defiant. Present, but never seen kind, but never asking for anything in return. But not anymore. I won't shrink to meet anyone's expectations again. I am Lily, a single mother, a woman who once stumbled, who was once dismissed, who stood in the shadows. But I'm also someone who got back up, who raised a child that knows how to love, how to be brave, and how to speak. The truth, what took me over 30 years to learn. Grace understood at 7, I won't apologize for being different, because it's that difference, that refusal to conform to old expectations that set me free. Yesterday, David sent another message. I've been thinking about taking some time off to travel for a few weeks. Maybe I'll start by visiting you and Grace if that's okay, I smiled. This wasn't the distant David anymore. This was a brother truly trying to reconnect, not out of obligation, but out of real love. And the biggest surprise came just hours later when my mother sent a text. If you have time, I'd like to see you. Not to talk about anything big, just to sit with you for a while. Would that be all right? I didn't reply right away, not out of anger, but because I needed to be sure that if I went, I'd go as an equal. Not beneath, not apologizing for who I am. I closed my phone, stood up, and pulled the blanket over Grace. She was fast asleep, her cheeks still flushed from a day. Full of emotion, I whispered softly, knowing she couldn't hear. You rewrote my story, sweetheart, and I'll never let it repeat itself. I walked back to my room and opened my laptop. For the first time in years, I started writing not a resume, not a job application, not a complaint letter, but the first lines of a book about women who've been mislabeled and their journey to reclaim their true names. Lily's story isn't just about reclaiming her voice in a family that once dismissed her. It's a symbol for anyone who's ever been labeled who stayed silent just to keep the peace from being called bad luck. Lily stood up, broke the mold, and gave both her daughter and herself the right to be loved, the right way. She learned that courage doesn't lie in endurance, but in speaking up for what's right, even when no one else dares to. What do you think about Lily's journey and young Grace's bravery? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss the next powerful and heartfelt story about family and